Dr. Tom Walters. What's up, man? Welcome.
Thanks for having me, man. This is awesome to be here.
Yeah.
Maui, this is the best location I've been for a podcast. So
This is not too bad, right?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, and you came at a good time, too. The whale. Have you seen any whales yet?
I haven't.
They've just started. I have not seen one either, but
okay.
People are seeing them.
Yeah, we have some friends who live out here in Kihei, and we usually go out on their boat, so I've been lucky to see some whales out here, but I need to go check it out.
It's wild. It's my favorite time of the year, and I'm about to leave for a few weeks, which is just sad, but yeah, whale season, we go out every year with paddleboard out there, and you just paddle like a mile or two out there, and you're just alone with whales, and it's the craziest experience.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's kind of freaky when they get real close to the boat.
I
remember seeing this one where a video of a whale breaching and landing on this kayak.
Yep. Yeah, I saw the one. Did you see the one the other day? Maybe it was the same one. Where the guy was kite surfing, and it was cool. They got the video on two angles. They got a video of somebody from the beach recording him, and then he had a GoPro on him, and he's just whipping kite surfing, and a whale came up right and just smacked him and hit him. Dude. And so they got this amazing 2-camera angle of him getting just whacked by a whale. He was okay, but the whale just breached and just came down on him. It was insane. But anyway, speaking of getting whacked by a whale and getting in pain, I want to talk to you a little bit today about injury, about pain, about a lot more than that. So I know you as like this uber huge YouTube, Instagram influencer, like Paris Hilton style. No, I was kidding. But one of the top orthopedic physical therapists in the world. I mean, millions of people have read your book. Millions of people follow you online on social. You've helped millions of people alleviate pain. Amazing, best-selling author. But take me back before all that. Who was Tom Walters?
Yeah, I think a lot of this stuff stems. I was telling you earlier, I grew up in Montana. Yeah. I grew up in kind of an interesting family. I grew up with my mom, my stepdad, and my parents were divorced when I was young. And me and my full brother, I have a half brother from my mom, my stepdad's relationship. And then we adopted 2 kids, so I've got an adopted brother and sister. But grew up in Montana. I was not super academic. I actually really didn't like school all the way through high school. I really thought I'd just go in the military, and I got into Taekwondo. I was in martial arts. That was kind of like my thing. I just couldn't wait to get out of school and go to judo and Taekwondo. Those were like the 2 things I was doing in high school. And so that was really my passion. Taekwondo became an Olympic sport the year I graduated from high school. So I really thought I would go that route and train for sport Taekwondo. And at the end of high school, for whatever reason, I had an Army recruiter come to the house. I was very close going that direction. A lot of people in Montana go into the military. And I just decided at the last second to try college for a year, and I took anatomy and physiology and really became obsessed with it. I was in an exercise science major, and nobody had told me there was such a thing as exercise science. I was in junior high and high school, I was reading Muscle and Fitness. I was really into thinking about how your body can change with exercise and really thinking about it from a performance standpoint. And I think I was always kind of thinking about this idea of training the body. And then in high school, I had a knee surgery, and I went to physical therapy for that. I wasn't thinking about it as a career or anything at that point, but I think that was my first exposure to you can also use exercise to heal the body. And that area of study is referred to as pathokinesiology, which is basically studying abnormal human movement. And so that was really my first exposure. So then when I went to college and started taking exercise science classes and took anatomy and physiology, then this idea that I could take that exercise science degree and go into a field where I could help people who have injuries and pain. That's kind of how it happened. But I would have never guessed it. I hated school. Always got notes sent home that I wasn't doing homework.
I'm convinced that the kids that get in trouble for not doing their homework are probably the most successful kids later on in life. I don't know why that is, but something about breaking the rules allows for more creative thought later on.
I definitely know a lot of people in that boat. So, and I don't know. I mean, not to overgeneralize, but I think for a lot of males, that just isn't that model, sitting all day. And it just isn't. I mean, my brothers all went into trade programs. It just wasn't the right environment for them. And I think now having my own kids, I have 2 daughters, so it's a little bit, they're definitely different than growing up with boys. But our friends who have sons, you can just see that they tend to, on average, have a harder time sitting still in class than the girls. And I just think maybe even for a lot of the guys and maybe the girls that fall into that boat, maybe there's a different way to educate them, and you guys might be doing something similar. But
with our little mini co-op homeschool thing, whatever we're building here. Have you heard that there's a Jordan Peterson clip that's gone pretty viral about like little boys, and like we we think there's something wrong with them, and so we medicate them, and we put them back in their rows, and they don't want to stay in their rows. They like, because little boys aren't meant to be put in these rows.
Yeah, we think about how I feel like my mom works in psychiatry, and I feel like when we were kids, every boy had ADD.
Yeah.
And it's like you just got to medicate them and
Yeah,
calm
yeah.
them down, and really it's like that's probably just being a boy.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I've had parents say, and I'm sure there are many cases where people actually have some problem, but so many times, like I'll be hanging out with friends of mine, and their boy especially is just being crazy like a boy, and they're like apologizing for it. And, oh yeah, he's got ADD or he's got this thing. I'm like, no, it's okay. Like, it's totally fine. He's attacking my leg right now and kicking me and trying to murder me. That's what little boys are supposed to do. Totally. Supposed to learn how to murder people, which is super funny. But like,
I think
that's
boys,
human nature.
there was that guy that had that TV show for a while on. It was all on dogs, but it was like, was it Cesar Millan?
Yeah.
But it was like you had to exercise your dog first, and then discipline, and then like I think maybe it was like this triage of things. But it was like exercises first. I think little boys are like that. Like, they just calm down and behave better if you just exercise.
Yeah. Yeah, I took my son on a walk last night, and it took us, I don't know, an hour to get half a mile down there, because like he's just bouncing off every single item he can find and playing with it and jumping off of it. And we got back though, and he was a different person. He was calm and he was happy, and I'm like, oh, I did a good job. I did a dad thing like I should have done. I was pretty happy about that. All right, so you go to decide to become a doctor of
Physical therapy.
Where did you meet your wife? Where'd that come?
I met her in physical therapy school. She's a PT as well.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So we both went to college basically for kinesiology and exercise science, 2 different colleges. And then I left Montana because I was just tired of cold weather. And I just thought I'll go to Arizona or Southern California. And we both ended up going to this physical therapy program in Southern California. For PT school, you have to go to get a bachelor's degree, and then you do this basically like a 3-year doctorate.
Okay.
It's very similar to kind of the chiropractic model. But I met her there. So yeah, she's an orthopedic physical therapist. She's not practicing right now. She, PT, it's a hard profession. Actually, most people only last about 9 years on average in it. And I think it's like a lot of healthcare, PT especially, people are coming with pain, and it's a negative. It's not like going to the gym. Like, you're a trainer. Everyone's usually kind of upbeat and positive, and
I'm getting ripped.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But people coming into PT are, they're kind of down. Like, it's hard on them psychologically. They're not doing the things they want to do. And I think, and just the way healthcare is structured, it's hard to not get burnt out in it. So she's doing other things.
Can you explain for those who didn't know, because up until a week ago I didn't know, what is physical therapy? It's like what I thought it was isn't actually what it is. So what is physical therapy?
Yeah, no, it's great to start there because you just assume people know. Physical therapy is basically it's the practice of, man, when I'm so deep in it, how do I say this in just a couple of sentences? But it's basically looking at the musculoskeletal system, the neuromuscular system, right? So it's like kind of what people think of as their physical body. Obviously, there's a mind-body connection, but looking at impairments in the physical body. So physical therapists will perform evaluations and assess people who have pain. Pain's the number one impairment, and so. But then after that, it's looking at impairments in movement, basically, kind of your movement system. So like if you had a mobility impairment, a range of motion restriction, or you had a strength impairment, or you had some kind of coordination or motor control impairment. So there are physical therapists. In physical therapy, you can get board certifications like doctors do. And so I'm an orthopedic PT, which is most of the common kind of joint-based muscle, joint pains, arthritis, neck pain, tennis elbow, things like that. But there are neurological physical therapists who only treat people with spinal cord injuries and multiple sclerosis and diseases of the nervous system and injuries. There are pediatric physical therapists who only treat kids, geriatric physical therapists. So there's a bunch of different specialties, but they're all looking at your movement system and evaluating it for problems in the movement system, and then coming up with treatment strategies, which in physical therapy aren't going to be medication based. They're going to be usually movement and exercise based strategies.
That makes sense. So I'm going to attempt to not make this whole show just me asking you questions about my body because I'm a mess. But I think a lot of people listening to the show are in pain. There are probably a lot of people around my age. I'm 38, almost 39, and I'm just starting to feel it like a lot, right? I also did jiu-jitsu for a number of years and got thrown around a lot in that. And jiu-jitsu is hard when you're rolling with white belts, especially because nobody knows how to control themselves yet. And so you're just getting thrashed. So back in December or January, I guess technically, I set a goal. And I said this year, my number one goal the whole year was actually not financial, was not relational, spiritual. It was, I want to fix my back. This is the year I fix my back. It's been painful for years. I've complained about it on social media and podcasts for years. And so I'm like, I'm going to fix it. So I started by a number of things. I started, stretching every day. Didn't really get any better. I started eating differently. I hired a coach, which has been great for building some muscle. I have more muscle than I did before. I've lost some weight. Feel real good about that. Ryan Kennedy, actually one of our guests we had on, he's a naturopath guy, amazing. Back still hurts. So then I'm like, okay, I'm going to the gym. Started going to the gym. Started deadlifting with this dude over here, Alex.
Deadlifts solve all problems.
Yeah, made it way worse. Deadlifting didn't work. Squats didn't work. So I stopped doing the lower body stuff. I switched to just upper body at the gym, went to Legree, which is Pilates. So it's a Pilates on the reformer machine. Because everyone says like that will strengthen your core, which will help your back. Been doing that now for 4 months, pretty consistently. No better. So then in that process, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the chiropractor. Did chiropractor 12 times. The first time I felt, maybe it was in my head, maybe it wasn't, felt better, like maybe 30% better. Never got any better from there. And then I just keep doing things to it. So here I've tried all these things. Finally, I'm like, all right, nothing's working. I'm going to get an MRI. I'm like, there must be something broken or something wrong, maybe MRI. So I go to the doctor. I mean, shocking, 9 months into the year, I finally decided to go to a real doctor. And I'm like, this is the problem. I need an MRI. And he's like, well, before we do an MRI, we have to send you to physical therapy for insurance reasons and all that. You have to do 6 sessions or something like that of physical therapy. And I'm like, well, I assume physical therapy was just for old people who need to like work their ankles or something. And he's explaining to me that like he said, and he had all these stats of like people when they just go get an MRI, it was like, and maybe you know more of this data than I'm going to probably butcher it, but basically you have a higher chance of dying if you just get an MRI and then try to fix it than if you just go to physical therapy and fix it, which I thought was fascinating. So here I am. Finally, last week for the first time, this week, on Monday, I went to physical therapy on Monday morning, and then I went again this morning. And yeah, it was just like, I don't know, them asking a lot of questions. I'm like, does this hurt? Does this hurt? Does this hurt? And then these little exercises that like hold this ball between your legs and now rotate it this way and squeeze it. So anyway, I feel like maybe I just not wasted. The first 9 months, I probably should just started with going to a doctor. It's just funny.
No, I think you did what a lot of people do, and I don't think there's necessarily something wrong with that. I mean, if you look at the world, there are a lot of different movement practitioners, and a lot of people with back pain get better doing exactly what you did and going, like they go to Pilates or they go to yoga or they start deadlifting. Or,
he agrees with me. He doesn't want to say it, but he agrees with me.
Deadlifting does help.
Nobody deadlifts 600 pounds and feels good after that, except for Alex. That's
400.
Chiropractic, adjustment, manipulation, those kind of manual therapy based things. A lot of people, those do help a lot of people. And so in some ways I don't want to say I like that strategy. I'd probably like if you just went to the physical therapist first. Not necessarily the medical doctor, because you can get great medical doctors who are up to date on kind of pain and injury science, and it sounds like you got someone who didn't want to order imaging.
Yeah, he didn't just, he's like, no, we're not doing that. We're not giving you medicine. Go to physical therapy.
Totally, which is great. Like, that's what you want to hear from. And I think a lot of younger orthopedic doctors and primary care doctors are getting better at that. But it's just like, imaging, especially MRIs in the spine, there are a lot of things that exist on imaging that you can't necessarily say this is the cause of your symptoms. And the problem is when there is something there, it could just be an age-related change. When people see those things, it often is detrimental to their recovery. So if you look at places like in the UK, and this is probably what the road this physician was going down, you can't actually get an MRI for back pain unless you've done 6 weeks of physical therapy. They just won't do it in the beginning because they know it worsens outcomes. If you have really specific, the only cases where they will is if you have, say, really severe radiating nerve pain down one or both legs and you're having weakness with it, like your legs are buckling or something. Then that can be more sinister and they'll order imaging. But, I think the thing why I'd say there's a lot of, you've got chiropractors, you've got acupuncturists, there's a lot of different professions out there that would treat something like back pain. Even to some degree, like strength coaches and trainers, like they're encountering people every day with back pain and helping them with exercise. I think what's different about the physical therapist, and look, there's good and bad PTs too. So you have to really hunt for a good one. And I think you want to try and find, like, say with your situation, you have back pain. You would want to find an orthopedic PT. So a PT who is board certified in orthopedics, they would have the letters OCS after their name. That's just a helpful thing for people. It'll be a letter and then CS. It means orthopedic clinical specialist. A neurological PT would be neurological clinical specialist. So they'll have a degree and then this board certification. But a good PT is going to do what you've been through. They're going to take you through all these tests. They're going to have you move in certain ways. And then they're going to palpate. I mean, I tell every person who comes into PT, my goal is to reproduce your familiar symptoms. Because if you can reproduce the person's symptoms, then you have an idea of how you should treat it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what you were doing, even though it works for some people, it's just kind of a shotgun where you're just doing a bunch of different things that kind of target your back. And sometimes, really, some people that does work for them. They find the thing. And there is a lot of, even in pain, even if you go to PT, I tell everyone, everyone's pain is unique. And what ends up, we have research showing like these certain things have better evidence than these, but within that, everyone's pain is unique, and there is kind of an experimentation process of like what actually helps this person's symptoms.
That makes sense.
So you have to stick with it. Even I know you're just getting started with whoever this person is, but if they can reproduce your symptoms, I think you're getting closer to figuring out what it is that's causing your pain.
Yeah, she got really excited today when there was something, and every time I would do it, I'd be like, "Oh, there it is, that hurts," and she's like, "Yes, okay, I think we found it." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's it was like the Superman thing where you're like, when I did like the Superman thing every time, it was like killed.
Maybe a kind of extension sensitive.
Okay,
so loading into extension, so that's good. If you can, it sounds counterintuitive. You're like, why is the PT excited that I'm hurting? But it really does, because people who come in like you who maybe don't have an acute injury that started their pain problem, you're really kind of investigating and trying to figure out. It's kind of a detective hunt, which makes it fun to me, but that's good. If you can find something that turns on your familiar symptoms, then you get closer to figuring out what the problem is.
That makes a lot of sense. Hey, I want to ask you about some of the things like acupuncture and chiropractors here in just a second. Before we do, I want to get to today's show sponsor. Now, one thing we do on the show that I know you know is we donate all the ad revenue towards a charity of your choosing. So what breaks your heart? Where should we send the money from the show?
I was really excited, obviously the wildfires and just everything that's happened here. Growing up, living in Santa Barbara, we had the mudslides a few years back, and just how living in a community and seeing how horrible something like that is, fires and mudslides, and seeing how devastating the fires were out here. I know you guys, one of the organizations you work with is the Mackay Foundation. Yeah. And so I'd love to, send.
Dude, I'm part of the Mackay Foundation. Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, actually, ironically, that's where I'm leaving after this show. We have a board meeting for Mackay.
Dang,
so
that's awesome.
Sweet, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
That's really cool you guys do that.
Thanks. Yeah, it was like when the whole thing came down, it was like a group of business owners here. We're like, well, how can we help? Like, we're good at business, we're good at real estate, construction, all that. Like, what can we do? So
I was talking to a lady sitting next to on the flight over here. She lives in Maui and goes back and forth to LA. But when we had the mudslides, I think when you're on the mainland, it's so much easier to get resources.
Yeah.
Trucks can just drive in from everywhere.
Yeah.
And there was an organization that got together called the Bucket Brigade, and it was basically just community members who would volunteer to go scoop mud out of people's properties and things. But that's cool that you guys, to have that foundation and you're working a part of that. I can't imagine how much harder it is, like I say, to be on an island and not.
It was tough, especially that week. It's like, you have a fire almost anywhere, and you call the other fire stations that were within a 100-mile radius. They come over and help. It was just like, there's no one. There's no one coming. Yeah, it's different. So thanks, man. Appreciate that. Well, let's roll the ad. So in one of my books, I talked about the Deal Delta. The Deal Delta says in order to accomplish any real estate investment, you have to have three things. You have to have knowledge of how to get deals, how to put it all together and all that stuff. You have to have hustle. You have to have doing the work, taking the actions, doing all that stuff. And third, you have to have money. But the important thing is you do not need all three. So if you have money, you can invest with people who have the knowledge and have the expertise and the hustle to get it done. That's what Open Door Capital is there for. So if you've got money, you don't need to go out there and find deals and analyze deals and negotiate an offer and do all that work. You can just partner with me and my team. I got 100 people out there every day working to build your wealth greater and greater all the time. So if you've got money, come. Open Door Capital. We can help put that money to good use. Go to odcfund.com right now. Get on our email list, and you'll see the deals that we've got. And I think they're going to blow your mind. You can get real cash flow, real appreciation, real tax benefits, real loan pay down, and do literally nothing. It's the coolest thing in the world. All right. We got to get to live reading of that. That would have been a perfect time. Speaking of, whatever. We'll get there. We'll get there. Live reading. You ever done live reading ads?
Uh-uh.
Yeah, like we're instead of like, hey, cue the ad, it would be like,
oh, you do it right now.
Yeah, that would be super cool. Yeah, we want to get to that point.
I've never seen anyone do it.
Yeah,
like
I haven't
that
either.
would be,
But I would love to get to the point where I'm like, speaking of fire, you know what's
that would be amazing if you just jumped into it. I'd be like,
yeah,
wow, what's this is unbelievable.
I think
It'd be
Ben
awkward for you though. You're just like, what happened?
Yeah, what happened? Yeah.
If you didn't tell me beforehand, I'd be like,
yeah. That's why I drink my Ovaltine. There's that scene in the Truman Show where you remember the Truman Show?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where Jim Carrey, where he's like sitting there stressing about like, having a mental breakdown. His wife's like,
and then the commercial
she's like, maybe you should drink here or whatever. Yeah, it's like it's so awkward. That's one of my favorite movies. All right, let's talk about chiropractors, acupuncture. Are those just witch doctors? Is there value there? How much is there value? How much is crazy? What's your stance on that?
Yeah, no, there's definitely evidence for those interventions. I'd say it's less than, and you have to be kind of careful with something like chiropractic because there are different practitioners in the ways, their approaches to how they treat people. And so some chiropractors are actually very similar to orthopedic physical therapists. There's a portion of manual therapy, kind of that hands-on work, and then there's an exercise component. And so they're very focused on the musculoskeletal system and rehab. And I think that's evidence supported. There's some chiropractic things where they'll claim that like a spinal manipulation is treating something systemically. And I think I have more problems with those, or telling people that like they're putting someone's spine back in alignment.
Yeah.
There's a lot of harmful things that come from that. It ends up making people dependent on that intervention, and there's really no research to support it. So I think, though, if you're looking at pain, there is evidence to support some of the interventions you'd associate with chiropractic, like adjustments and manipulations, in the short term.
Yep.
They don't have long-term evidence like exercise, but I manipulate some people and do manual therapy. That intervention does have short-term evidence, maybe like in the 6-week range for kind of when somebody's like having acute pain, it helps to calm things down. Same with acupuncture. Acupuncture, and I talk about these in the book. There's a whole chapter that we will put those in complementary and alternative medicine kind of interventions. So they are things that often complement and go well with the exercise and movement therapy. But you wouldn't want somebody to only do those because they tend to be passive. So somebody's doing it to you. Yeah. Right? You're laying on a table and somebody's doing it to you. And passive interventions have just, the research isn't as great for those in the long term for pain. You need to get your system moving. You need to activate your muscles. You need to move. And that's where that exercise and movement therapy comes in. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there's like this growing trend. Maybe it's not growing. I don't know. There's like a popular trend on TikTok and Instagram of the chiropractors just like cracking people's necks, and the sound effect they add after the fact. I'm almost positive they're usually adding that later. It's like, is that just makes for good entertainment? Oh yeah, it's so engaging. Yeah. I mean, those are like the viral videos. I mean, I've done some of them. Yeah. Like, they just like, I have one where I'm manipulating Kirsten's ankle, my wife. Like, there's one where we'll pull on people's feet, and sometimes you pull on their foot and their ankle cracks. And I put a microphone on her leg, and everyone thinks it's fake, and the microphone's on her leg, but they just think the sound is. I'm sure some of those other ones are. There's so many funny videos out there where like somebody crunches a bag of chips on the side. Oh yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, it's so funny. But those make for great viral content. I think people like the idea. There's still so many people that believe that if you get manipulated like that it's changing something instantly with the alignment of your body or doing something. It's like you're fixing this thing and putting it back. Yep. And so I think that's why there's so much fascination. I think if everyone in the public knew that it was just like popping your knuckles on your hands and just a pressure change, they wouldn't. So is that what that is? That's all that is. Yeah, your facet joints in your spine are about the size of your knuckles, and they just pop. That's funny. Yeah, they definitely make it sound, because they'll say like, oh yeah, here's your spine. It's way out of thing, so we're gonna put it back together, and now it's in a line, and now you're not hurting anymore. Yeah, if you do follow-up X-rays, it doesn't really change. That's funny. Yeah. So that's the problem with that. That's actually one of the reasons I got started in social media. I was so frustrated having patients come in, and they're essentially being told these things. Telling somebody that, look, you got to come here for 6 to 8 weeks and get this treatment so that I'm going to do this x-ray beforehand, I'm going to show you after that it fixes it, is you're using that as, it's good for business. It just keeps the person dependent. You have to keep coming back. Yep. And then if after 8 weeks, they're like, oh, it just didn't, I've heard people receive this message, oh, it just didn't take, we've got to do another 8 weeks. It's BS. Yeah. I know every time I go to a chiropractor, it's usually, I should say, there's been a couple of times in my life where I've done something and then I've been like, oh, I just threw my back out, and then I went to a chiropractor and it fixed it immediately. Yep. It's been very rare, but it's happened twice in my life. Normally you go there and they're like, oh yeah, it looks like your spine's out of alignment.
and they'll do something. They'll crack the neck. They'll do the thing. I'll walk out and I'm like, well, I feel a little bit weird because something just, they just broke my neck in half. Yeah, violated my space. And then they're like, you should feel better in 3 to 5 days. And I'm like, well, I would have felt better in 3 to 5 days anyway.
Yes,
What are we talking about here?
And I don't want to, I have lots of good chiropractor friends who do like what you're talking about. Like somebody comes in because there is a place for that. If somebody's like had a back or neck pain, they're locked up and the muscles are spasming, there is research supporting when you manipulate some people, not only it does things placebo-wise too. Like if you believe it's going to help you, it can help, but it also does things at the tissue level, and you'll find that the surrounding muscles that are spasming, their tone will kind of reduce. And I think people just have to know that it can be a helpful intervention at the right time and place, but you want to eventually get to exercise to kind of keep that problem away, reduce it from the risk of it coming back. But it's those models of like you've got to keep coming back, and just what you said. Most things in the musculoskeletal system, that's good for people to know, is that it's called regression to the mean. Most things, if you just give them time, they just get better. Yeah. I mean, your back's been going on a long time, so. But most things will just get better with time, but practitioners will take credit for it.
Yes, yeah.
You know what I mean? They'll be like, oh, it's this intervention I did. That's where you're getting better. Like, really, if you just track people, most get better. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, there's a logical fallacy. I don't remember what it's called, but basically that's where you take credit for things that you don't. Yeah, shouldn't. We do that in real estate sometimes. Like I buy a bad real estate deal, and then the rents just went up by $800 a month over the last 3 years. I'm a genius. Like I'm really good. It's like
survivor bias.
Yeah, survivor bias. Maybe. Yeah, it's just like. Yeah, so then you assume that you're a genius. Yeah, I always preach against like this idea of people who got into real estate or any business in the last like 4 years. Like everybody made money. Like money was everywhere. It was just so easy to make money in the last like 4 or 5 years in real estate and a lot of businesses. It's like, well, was that good, or was that just like, were you actually good, or
just the right,
right place, right time? Yeah, we'll take credit for it.
Yeah.
All right. So chiropractor is funny. What about things like Deep Blue as an example? It's like that, like, or like the creams that you rub on you. They sell them at the store, but Deep Blue I know is like a doTERRA product that I just bought. Somebody was selling that, and my wife's a big fan of it. But does that stuff work? They sell it, Target, Walmart. They sell different creams that.
Yeah, I mean, some of them can, like some of these other passive interventions, can kind of have a temporary. I think a lot of them work by sort of distracting your brain from what you're normally feeling. It's almost like, you'll hear of like TENS units, and have you ever seen those? Like they're little things, the little pads you stick on, it drives an electrical current. So they might do it in the physical therapy. A lot of times they'll do it at the end of the session. Chiropractic office. That's another one where it's almost similar to me, like some of these creams where, like if you put a cream on and maybe it tingles or does something like that. I think it's like the electrical stimulation where it's sort of just temporarily distracting your brain from your actual symptoms. Most of them aren't. I mean, there are some that have anti-inflammatory medications, but if you look at something like back pain, you're talking about pretty deep structures. Like that thing on the skin isn't going to penetrate down there. Even ice and heat don't really get to that depth, but people will temporarily feel better. So I think there is something physiologically at like that tissue level, and your skin has a ton of nerve endings. So if you change input into the skin, that's what a lot of interventions actually do. Like a lot of pain interventions are thought to change pain because of a neurophysiological process where you're basically giving a new input into the nervous system, some novel input, and then that changes the output. Interesting. Because pain is one of the outputs. It's not this, when I came out of PT school, we always thought of our interventions as very kind of structural and biomechanical. Like, hey, I'm going to do this technique on you, this manual therapy technique, or I'm going to do this exercise, and it's going to move the ball. If you're looking at your shoulder, maybe it's going to move the ball backwards in the socket. And it's changing your pain because we shifted the ball, its orientation in the socket. And now you look at these things, most interventions that work for pain, it doesn't seem like that's actually the case. It doesn't really change people's alignment. It doesn't really change their posture, but it probably does something to their nervous system. It's like you're just giving a new input, and then that changes that pain output.
That makes sense. I recently went to a shoe store and I was looking at different shoes because, like, again, trying to figure out what to do with my back, this year. And the guy there was like, oh, you know what you need? And it's a shoe store that sells CBD oil. And so he's like, you know what you actually need? And he didn't bring out CBD. He brought out, actually, it was a THC, like, cream, like a weed cream. And he's like, just try this, man. Try it. So I'm like, okay. So I try it. And I put it on the lower back. And it might be placebo. I don't know. Felt 10 times better. It was the best. I was like, oh shoot, I feel great.
Yeah.
So I bought this jar of this medicine and I took it home and I put it on later and it didn't do a thing. I just smelled like a weed shop. So like,
It didn't do anything later on.
no, I didn't do anything like that. But when I was in the shop, like that's why I'm like, it must have been placebo. I don't know, but it took away the pain while I was standing in that shoe store.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It was a weird experience.
That must be the explanation. I mean, what you could imagine, like if you're in that space, you're in that environment, this guy is talking.
He's like, this
hyping
is
it
the
up.
thing, yeah.
Totally. That could have tapped into that placebo mechanism, which is a real thing physiologically. Like our brain makes basically morphine. It's an endogenous opioid system that will let it out and kind of, because you have these messages, like when you have pain, you have these danger messages coming up. It's called nociception, but it comes up your spinal cord, and there are systems in your brain and spinal cord that you can basically send molecules down to kind of block that and turn it down.
Yeah, interesting.
Which that's a lot of what we know of now. Before it was just like placebo, and now they're kind of figuring out, well, what are these kind of physiological mechanisms underpinning placebo? So if you didn't feel it when you got home, but I mean, if you had told me, oh, it did help when I got home too, I'd say, go, yeah, it's awesome, try it. Like I would never tell somebody, unless there was something harmful about it, like some really adverse side effect. All of those other interventions, I'm totally fine with people doing them. I'm not ever, unless it's gonna like sometimes chiropractic is so similar that I will tell people to hold on that while we're doing our things, because they can be so similar in what they're doing to the system that I don't know because sometimes you're introducing too many variables and you don't know what's changing the person.
So speaking of the THC though, what are your thoughts on medical marijuana with pain relief and
I think there's
helping?
a bunch of research out there. I think I've seen a bunch. I haven't gone through that research recently, but I know for like cancer pain there's a bunch. So I think for chronic pain conditions, you'd be interesting because you technically kind of fall into a chronic back pain situation based on the length of time you've had it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if like an oral kind of THC type. Maybe
I have some.
It would be.
Thanks, Alex.
I'm not saying you have to do it, but it might be, and you might not want to do it now while you're in PT because it is another variable.
Yeah.
But it might be interesting as an experiment to see. I mean, at the end of the day, you'd rather prioritize the movement and exercise things. I think that you have active control over.
Yeah.
Versus again having to be dependent on something.
Yeah, when I was doing the physical therapy, on Monday morning, the woman, was doing all these little things. Okay, move your leg. Can you bend it this way? Any pain there? Can you go this way? And she guys kept doing that, and everything was like, yeah, that seems fine. And then she did something with my hip. I'm gonna butcher the terminology, but like the way my hip moved outward or something like that. And she's like, okay, you do that. And she's like, okay, I said do that. Go ahead. And I'm like, I am. She's like, oh, that's it. And so there was like this, like, oh, your hip doesn't move in that direction, period. And so she's like pulling on it. And she did this weird thing with like a belt. And she put a belt on it.
Totally.
Mobilized
it. Yeah. It's
it was interesting because she's like, okay, we definitely want to go. So it goes back to that. I could borrow some THC oral, whatever from Alex over here and try to make it feel better. But clearly there's a couple actual problems. Like my hip doesn't move a certain direction that it should move. So let's address that. And that's what I'm just blown away that I'd never thought of this before. Like that physical therapy could be the answer to this.
Yeah. And the fact that you, even when you were asking me, which I think was great to cover, like what exactly is physical therapy, that this just kind of came on your radar.
Yeah. It just came on my radar.
Yeah. Which is, like good in that you haven't maybe had a bunch of serious injuries and, orthopedic surgeries and things like that. But yeah, I think for anyone with a movement system problem, that's where you want to start, because most of the research will say most musculoskeletal injuries and pain issues, it will say to start with conservative care if you look it up online, which just basically means physical therapy.
Yeah.
And I think I would tell people to go that route because it is more exercise and movement focused. There is that manual therapy component, but you're teaching people things to self-manage. It's like if you go see a counselor for a mental health issue, they're going to teach you strategies to self-manage.
Yeah.
So, and I think physical therapists in the movement world are the closest ones to being able to kind of diagnose, a movement problem and then give you things that you can do on your own to self-manage.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the other things are good complements, but they tend to be, again, someone's doing it to you and you have to go there.
Yeah. This is going to be a very general question, and I know there's not an easy answer for this, but let's just say somebody comes to you and they have a back problem and there's like, what are some stretches I can do that should help? Are there like a few, like without knowing every detail of the problem in their back, is there like, oh yeah, these are the 3 stretches that people with bad backs should probably do every day?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Most people with, you could pick, I would say a lot of it is actually our hip-based stretches.
Okay.
I mean, that physical therapist assessing your hip, a lot of people, your hip is the next adjacent joint to your low back, and biomechanically they function together. It's called your lumbopelvic region because your lumbar spine, pelvis, and hip all work together. So for a lot of people with back pain, actually, if you just did hamstring stretches, hip flexor stretches, and glute stretches, that helps most back pain.
Yeah.
So, you would have other stretches for the spine. Like you might do, there's a whole system called the McKinsey system from Australia, but it involves a lot of extension stretching, which is actually might not be good for you because you sound extension sensitive with the Superman. But you basically have people do these stretches where they kind of arch their back. But honestly, most back pain people, if you have them do hip flexor, hamstring, and glute stretches, their back pain gets quite a bit better. But it's temporary. Stretching also tends to be temporary.
What do you mean by that? And why is that? And what's the real solution then?
Well, they'll usually find that their symptoms are better for a short period of time after the stretch, but it doesn't usually change people. In a couple hours, they'll feel their back pain again. So, and the question there sometimes is maybe you need to hold the stretches longer to where you actually create some more permanent change in your nervous system and maybe even in your muscle fibers. Most people are holding stretches for 15 to 20 seconds. So it is interesting looking at the stretching research. I think sometimes people don't hold things long enough.
Really?
Especially coming from a martial arts background, it took me a long time to get the splits. If you want people to get flexible, you have to be in these hold positions sometimes for several minutes.
Wow.
And some of that, there is research in the stretching world showing that your muscle fibers will actually change length. The sarcomeres, which are the base functional unit of your muscle fiber, you'll add more of them, so your muscle will actually get longer. But the other thing too is that your muscles all have these stretch receptors that are basically a muscle fiber that's wrapped by a nerve fiber, and they detect stretch. So if you stretch too quickly or too intensely, your body will respond by making that muscle contract to protect you. So if you've ever held a stretch for a long period of time, you'll notice that as you hold it, eventually it will let go, and you can kind of sink into it farther. That's thought to be those stretch receptors letting go and your nervous system kind of letting go. I think a lot of people who stretch, like people with back pain who are stretching, they aren't holding things long enough to actually get their nervous system to change more permanently. So that might be one thing. And then, for some people, it might be that stretching is usually just one element of a more comprehensive program. So usually there's some other kind of activation and strengthening exercises of the hip musculature and the spinal musculature. So I think for a lot of people, they need that next element to maybe kind of help lock in some of those changes.
Yeah, so you're stretching, but then you're also building muscle in some area that maybe you were weak before.
Yeah, sometimes it's just learning. Actually, for a lot of people in their back, sometimes it is getting stronger. That's where deadlifting can help some people with back pain. Their posterior chain,
Alex, give me the look.
Yeah, there's research to support posterior chain strengthening. So strengthening your hamstrings, your glutes, your calves, your low back extensors. Most people ignore those. They're not the mirror muscles. So the whole backside of the body kind of gets ignored. So there's actually studies coming out more and more on this on posterior chain strengthening for back pain. But so there's that strength side. Some people though, in the low back, especially in the spine, sometimes it's just teaching people how to actually create that mind muscle connection with some of their deeper muscles in their spine. Some people are just, they're kind of completely unaware of some of we call it the kind of deep stabilizing system, but you have this transverse abdominis muscle that's this deep spinal stabilizer, your pelvic floor, you've heard of Kegels, the pelvic floor, and then those tie into a really deep muscle in your low back called multifidus, and those three are sort of neurologically connected, and some people not everyone is like this, but some people need to learn how to just turn those on, which isn't really strengthening, it's like an activation mind-muscle connection thing.
That makes a lot of sense.
If that PT, you said you were doing some little fine movements, you may have an element not knowing exactly what that person's doing, but there may be some of that element, especially you being tall, you have a long spine.
Yeah.
You see a lot of people with longer torsos. You see, just anecdotally, I don't have any research sources, but you see, over the years, I've seen people with that kind of body shape maybe being a little more prone to low back pain.
Yep.
And so you might be the person where gaining some strength in those big global muscles is important, but also learning to kind of control those deeper stabilizers.
Alex is again looking at me.
Have you guys been talking about this?
He's been
Let's go to the gym, bro.
Yeah, I know. He's like,
you had to come all the way here.
Yeah.
I've been telling you for months.
Man, I've been going to Pilates. That's working those muscles just in a way that I'm not going to kill me like you did.
Can I actually ask a question?
Yeah.
My father-in-law, Steve, he's 62 or so, and he's like, goes to the doctor. He's like, my knee's killing me, and they say, hey, you need a new knee, which is, in my head, is not that surprising. And so he's like, well, if I'm gonna get a new knee, I'm gonna use the last of this one up. And so him and the family, they go to England and they hike the Wainwright. Have you heard of this? You hike the entire eastern coast of England for like 30 days, and he gets done and he comes home and they goes to the doctor and they're like, you don't need a knee anymore. It's fine because you've been. So I guess the question is, with a lot of folks, they want acupuncture or chiropractic or weed or but how much is it people just not doing the work, the hard work of using this machine that you're given to use it to its effectiveness, and then it like sort of, it's a very, I look at it as a very much, if you don't use it you lose it sort of thing. Is that a real thing?
For sure. I mean, that's a huge component of a lot of musculoskeletal conditions, is that people are just there's a lot of people who are more sedentary, or I don't even want to, there are a lot of people who are incorporating kind of general movement exercise like walking, and they're doing things like that, but they aren't incorporating really what we'd call kind of therapeutic exercise, like where it's you're specifically loading and challenging certain areas of your body. You're using biomechanics and kinesiology to have a program that you make sure you're targeting each of these kind of movement areas of your body. Like I've got knee flexors and I've got knee extensors and my ankle plantar flexors, and your program is comprehensive enough that you are making each of those areas independently more resilient. And I think if you walking, and I do a lot of walking, like just general forms of exercise, those would probably be the base of your pyramid. Like you would have those just to kind of be getting enough movement each day. And honestly, most people, for a lot of pain conditions and injuries, if you just have people walk more and do things like that, they get better. But when you look at rehabbing from pain issues and injuries and reducing the risk maybe that you have these things, I think there's a lot of people that just aren't working on mobility and strength exercises on a regular basis that target these areas of their body. People who go to the gym and strength train, I mean, I was fortunate that in 7th grade we had a strength coach who taught our PE class, and I learned weightlifting. So I don't look like it, but it's like I learned.
You do.
Yeah, I learned all this kinesiology stuff early on, and then I was in martial arts and I learned all that, and like all this kind of movement education that I just didn't understand when I was a kid. And now being a PT, I realize I was gaining all these kind of fundamentals of movement. And I think there's a lot of people who just haven't had that. And even if they were in sports, martial arts is kind of unique in what it teaches you versus like if you play football or something.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of people, that kind of story, like for sure there's people who have osteoarthritis in their knee, and a doctor tells them they need a knee replacement, and they go and do a bunch of exercise and strengthening, and they get worse. Their pain is worse, and they still need a knee replacement. So that doesn't happen to everyone.
Totally anecdotal. I'm not saying that's a rule.
But even if you look at that condition, there's a ton of research to support people. For that example of knee arthritis, if you strengthen them leading into a total knee, they recover much faster. And you do hear of people that once they start doing mobility and strength exercises, and because like your quads, for instance, your quads are your main stabilizer of your knee joint. And so strengthening them kind of helps take stress off your cartilage, and osteoarthritis is a cartilage problem. So you will see people where they do those exercises and all of a sudden their pain goes way down. They're like, because usually pain's the main motivation for that surgery. You might have because some people can have a really bad x-ray where there's no joint space and they have osteoarthritis, they don't have that much pain. They're not going to have a knee replacement. So usually pain is the motivator. And so sometimes you will see people where they do the exercises, their pain goes down, and they can delay usually having something like that.
As a doctor of physical therapy, what advice do you have? Or let's phrase it this way. As a doctor of physical therapy, what are the most dangerous or pain-provoking exercises, activities, etc. for people over 40? Like, what should we avoid doing at this point of our life? Oh,
man. I don't know that I would tell any. Yeah, gosh, that's a hard one. Probably, I would say you have to assess risk. Those are probably the things you have to avoid. Like, I used to do jiu-jitsu. It's higher risk, especially with white belts.
Yeah.
Like, people,
I
almost had my elbow dislocated. Like, people scramble, and you can't control them. So I think, honestly, there aren't very many things that I would tell people you have to avoid as a physical therapist. I'm usually trying to help people keep going, but I would say if you're gonna be smart about it as you get older, you have to analyze the risk associated with different things and just you don't want to be fearful, like live in fear, but probably lean away from the things where the injury risk is really high, because the older you get, it's harder to recover those things, and those can take you down. If you have a difficult time recovering or you don't recover fully, that can lead to other impairments that lead to other issues as you age. And so I know for me, I've gotten tighter about saying I'm more willing to say no to activities. Somebody wants to go downhill mountain bike or something, or I would love to go back to jiu-jitsu. Yeah. But I'll probably go do like kickboxing or something and just kick pads, because the likelihood of injury is way lower, that I can kind of control it. So I'd say activity-wise, just be careful with the things. Be careful with situations where maybe you don't have a high skill level and you can't control. There's external variables you can't control. Like, so my daughters, were trying to teach them to ski. It's weird. Going to Montana, I didn't learn to ski. But we went, and the second time I like helicoptered my knee, and I was like, great, at 41, I'm going to tear my ACL. Yeah. And so I think as much as I want them to learn, I also just need to be really careful to move slowly with that, because the injury risk is way higher with that activity. I'm not good at it, and there's a lot I can't control.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on running? Like, is running good for you? Running bad for your knees, bad for your joints?
No, running is more positive than negative.
Okay.
There's this old idea that people would have heard, like, oh, running causes arthritis, and things. But actually, more recent research has shown that kind of moderate dose running actually helps protect the cartilage in your knees and hip. So, then people always ask, well, what's moderate dose? So I think, again, this kind of varies person to person. But, if you're somebody who's running like, 3 to 6 miles a few times a week, that's probably kind of in that moderate dose category. Maybe it's like a 10 to 15 miles a week type of thing. Yeah. Because if you look at, something like running, if you look at people who are really sedentary, they have more cartilage degeneration. You kind of need, your cartilage is kind of like a sponge, so you have to kind of load it and let a lot off it. And that helps it get nutrients. It doesn't have a blood supply, so you kind of have to pump nutrients into it. So if you're really sedentary, cartilage tends to deteriorate. And then if you load it way too much or way too heavily, so like you'll hear of people, maybe football players have a ACL tear or something like that. Those types of injuries traumas like that can injure your cartilage and increase arthritis and degeneration. So it's kind of those two ends of the spectrum. If you don't load it enough, it tends to break down. If you load it too much, it breaks down. So running kind of has this, moderate dose running kind of has this sweet spot of, it kind of challenges your cartilage and keeps it healthy.
No, that's cool. That's good to hear. I love running. It's one of my favorite things to do. But I do find that whenever I run now, the lower back just hurts the next couple of days. It seems to aggravate it. And so I've kind of taken the last 6 months or a year off of much running. Is that something, is there anything you can recommend? Like, is there more stretching I should do for that? Should I just wait till the back's better and I'm fixing it this other way? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's tricky. I think some of it goes back to how you're built. You probably are going to be a little more prone to that, again, just because anthropometrically you just have that long torso that you're going to have to control. And
tall and handsome is the
word. Yeah, tall and handsome. That's what I was like. Yeah. But you meet lots of people who are built like you who run and don't have any problems. So it's like you can't make it. It's not this hard and fast rule. But I think for you, this is actually similar to people who have other pain problems with running. You would look to try and reduce force and stress on the area a little bit. So that could be things like, one that's talked a lot about in the running world is increasing your cadence, which maybe you've played with this, but how many steps you take per minute. So if you take faster steps.
I haven't paid attention.
Yeah. So there are apps where you can track this. So if you increase your cadence, then each step with each foot, there's less ground reaction force, which means there's less force going up into your, so we're normally doing this for people with knee pain and things, but it's going to transfer your knee and your hip and your low back. So it counts for low back people too. But you can use an app like that and just experiment with, like, if I take more steps per minute, does that change how my back feels? It's going to feel like you're running a lot faster, but you're kind of keeping the same speed, but just more steps. You could look at reducing force in that way. You could look at external variables like the surface you're running on. So you might go run on a track, like if there's a university or a college or something or high school around here with a good track, run on that.
This is why.
We don't got a track. I was just wondering. But like running on cement or something.
Yeah.
There's just more force coming up in the system. So, shoe wear, of course, like playing with different types of shoes and how much support they have, just because that is an external shock absorber. So maybe adding like a Hoka I don't know, maybe you've tried like a shoe like that.
Hoka's the best shoe I ever bought. Like, that made such a drastic difference to my running. Like, it was overnight. I started wearing Hoka's, and
yeah, they're awesome. Like, and some people don't. Some people really want like minimal. Everybody's just different. Each person's unique, and you have to treat their system uniquely. But and then while you're in this period, there probably is. If somebody came into PT and had back pain currently, like you're talking about, I usually will tell people we don't want to totally stop your running program because that leads to you decondition. So we usually try to keep people on a running program, but we'll usually dial back the volume. So while you're going through this and trying to deal with it, if you notice that your back pain is one of the or that running is one of the triggering activities, you probably would try to dial it back, but keep it going as much as you can in a way that it's not hindering you from getting better.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have that stuff. I mean, honestly, a lot of physical therapy is behavior modification. You have the exercise and stuff, but most people have something in their life that's keeping it irritated, and it will usually stay irritated until you address that thing. So, I mean, I've got a bicep tendon thing right now that flares up from time to time, and it gets irritated by bench pressing and dips, and I usually don't want to stop doing those things. So it usually takes me like 6 months before I'm like, all right, I'll try and start modifying. And so if I don't make that modification, usually it just hangs around.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, dips. I like doing dips. I was at the gym 2 months ago, maybe 3, and I did some dips, and I heard it tear, like something in my shoulder, back, whatever up here. I heard it go, and I was like, what the? And then I couldn't lift my arm up for a good month, like higher than about this.
Dang.
Like it was rough. So I did dips yesterday with Alex though. And I did well. I know, clearly I need to do more. Yeah, man. And I'm just like, it reminds me of this joke. I can't remember if it was Brian Regan or Jim Gaffigan. One of them had this joke about like, I went to the doctor and I was like, hey, I've been whatever, when I move my arm like this, I'm really hurt. And the guy goes, yep. And then that's the end of the joke. It's like, yep. It's like once you're old, it's just like, yep, it hurts.
Exactly.
Like, there's no cure. There's nothing better.
I think there is a lot of truth to that, and sometimes that's helpful for people to know because we don't go around talking about our pain.
Yeah.
Like people just don't do it. But most people you talk to have something that's kind of bugging them.
Something that,
And I think it's probably good for people to know that. Like I think it's rare to have someone over the age of 35 who nothing bothers them.
Alex, what bothers you? Do you have any pain?
Is this my part of the podcast now? I get to talk about my stuff.
Let's hear it.
I got a thing in my foot now. If I bend this toe, this whole guy down here starts hurting. That's new.
Oh, wow.
I used to have a hip pain.
Yep.
Yep. I used to have a hip pain. Honestly, this is going to sound so ridiculous, but when I stopped squatting over 400 pounds, that hip pain went away.
Well.
So that's fixed. My knees are starting to get at me a little bit, and I do squat a lot, but it's in a way that it's never gotten me before. That's definitely new. Where I'm like, okay, this is the beginning of the end.
But I wonder, you are a gym guy, like a gym rat. You're at the gym all the time, and so I wonder if that actually makes you have less pain because you're always working things. Oh,
yeah, maybe. I feel actually fantastic at 40. I think there's people there's this old story I have when I was 19 or 18. I was in the Army and I was doing PT with these guys, and they're like 32 and they're like groaning and creaking and having complaints at 7 a.m. and they said to me like, oh, when you're our age, you'll be complaining too. And now I'm 40 and there's no chance they could come anywhere near me. And so I feel like the gym, even though I've done it probably to excess, it's one of the best investments I've ever made. 22 years of squats. Too much, but also like I feel very little pain.
Yeah, no, strength training, if you look at all the different exercise modalities in terms of kind of protecting your system from injury and probably the development of pain, strength training has the best evidence.
That's cool.
They've done studies on this where they compare mobility training, strength training, balance training, things like that. I mean, there's a place for all those other things if you have one of those impairments, but if you're just taking the person who is pretty healthy and doesn't have much going on that restricts them, if you're going to pick one thing, you'd pick resistance training.
Yeah, that's cool.
I mean, that's the thing, which it makes sense. Our body, the physical body is very mechanical, right? Yeah. I mean, you have your nervous system, so it's different than a car. It's not quite that simple, but it's like if you go and lift weights, then sometimes it can just be body weight. It doesn't always have to be with like real heavy weights. Like you are challenging those mechanical tissues, and the way they adapt is to become more resilient, become stronger. So if you think about if you have a muscle tendon unit and it becomes stronger, it takes more force for it to fail. Yeah. So you're just it makes sense. You're less likely to get injured. That thing, it's harder to tear it or injure it.
It's not team based, so you don't need anybody else to do it, and it's not finesse based. Like I'm not good at sports at all. So for me to go to the gym, I'm like I have to go up and down. It doesn't. It's not like you have to have balance, but it's a very much like I don't know. It's very simple for me.
We're gonna get good at pickleball though, you and I. We're going to crush your fiance.
You're going to be better at me than pickleball.
We're getting into it. All right. What about rucking? Like, I got a ruck right there.
Yeah.
Like 50-pound ruck. You like that?
I like rucking. Yeah. I have some buddies in Montana that are big into that, and so they run a whole. They train backcountry hunters. They are specialized in that population, so they use a lot of rucking, and I think it's a great. Rucking to me is like you can build some strength with it, especially if you're like going on trails or somewhere that we've got to climb some elevation, but you also get all that great cardio. Yeah. I was actually just thinking about getting one because I walk a lot and hike, and body weight just sometimes doesn't feel that challenging.
Yep.
So I think I'll probably get one or just load my backpack up or something. Yeah. So yeah, I think obviously each person's got to take it in consideration with their own unique symptoms they might have in their body. So like you can't just say it's good for everybody because you could have some people with back pain that would really make them worse. Yeah. So I think. But if you take the average healthy person, it's a great form to just get out there and like everybody's talking about zone 2 cardio right now and all this stuff. And I think rucking's a good way to.
Yeah, it wasn't making me feel better, so I put it on pause for a little bit. It's been sitting there for 6 months. But what I love the idea of is I do a ton of Zoom calls. I work all day on these calls, right? And most of them I don't have to have my face. So the idea was I go and walk around. But then walking just body weight wasn't as challenging. So the theory was put on a ruck every day, go for an hour around the hills in my neighborhood. Like, I'm up on this hill up here. Just go up and down hills while on phone calls. I thought that'd be a great workout. But yeah, every time I was just aggravating the back too much, so I stopped. But
yeah, you're kind of the person where if running and you're already kind of extension sensitive, putting something like that up on your shoulders, you're naturally an extension when you're standing, and that's going to put more kind of posterior force back there towards that. So you're kind of the example where right now it might not be the best option, but hopefully this person gets you sorted out and then you can start implementing. I mean, that's the idea, is that a lot of pain stuff is kind of this graded exposure type process where it's like you get the person calmed down and then you start to reintroduce things that challenge their nervous system. Yeah. And you do it in gradual steps. So that's probably something that could be like a goal that you kind of work towards.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I want to shift a little bit in this away from the physical, like how to heal certain things and the pain. I mean, you got a book on this, so people can obviously read a ton of stuff, and I'm very excited to dig in. But I want to get into the business of what you do a little bit and how you've built all the social media and the book writing and all that. But before we even get there, what do you love most about your wife?
Oh, man. I love probably most about her is just she is this like very stable, consistent, positive personality, and I swing all over the place. Mm-hmm. So she is that person that keeps me on the times. It's great when I'm really high, but on times when I'm down, she's sort of good at reminding me of why I'm doing things and what I'm doing and kind of pulling me out of that and just being that kind of stable force. I think that's like her. I think that's a gift for her, is just she's always consistent and stable, even in all this business stuff. And, because it's been kind of a new thing to take what was a hobby, this rehab science thing, and make it turn into a business. And she has a great business brain. I'm impulsive and moody, and she's just not that. So, and she can be honest about, things I might need to work on and improve on. So it's just that person. But I think that's the thing I love the most about her, is that personality trait.
That's cool. What about each of your girls?
Man, my oldest one, it was so fun. She just started 7th grade, and in Santa Barbara, you have to apply to all these different schools, and so you have all these essays you have to write as a parent. And a lot of it was actually really fun practice to just reflect on her and think about her. But my oldest one is extremely empathetic and thoughtful. She's a lot like my mom, who's in psychiatry. She's very similar to her. She's like the kid who will notice if somebody's not included and include them, and just this like really sweet person. So I love that most about her. The younger one is more that second child, kind of like spunky. She'll probably be healthier for it because she doesn't care. She's not so agreeable. She doesn't care so much about whatever people think. And I just love, like, sometimes I'll tell her something. She's like, who cares? So she'll say stuff like that. And I just love that about her. Just that kind of spunky, less concern about what people think. And so yeah, they're great little people, though.
Wow, that's so fun, man. It's the best part of life. All right, when did this whole idea of being an online personality begin? Were you like, I'm gonna go for it? Like, how'd that start?
No, I had no idea. I was teaching at a college in Santa Barbara. In between classes, would write things on Instagram. I mean, the motivation was that I had been a PT for 10 years at that point. This was in 2017, and was just frustrated. People would come in and I would hear kind of messages they'd been told by clinicians, unfortunately a lot of other clinicians, that were just harmful, and a lot of those things to kind of create dependency and keep them coming back, and that was really frustrating to me. And I also just, 10 years of practice, you start to see common patterns. You hear all the same, most humans have the same problems, the same kind of questions. And so I just thought I'll start posting on this and try to put something out. And I actually had deleted the account twice. I deleted it twice. And then I was just like, this is, because I would do things like in the gym, like me doing box jumps. I was like, this is narcissistic. Why am I doing this? So I deleted it twice. And then I went into class to teach one day, and the student was like, hey, you had this post on rotator cuff exercises. My mom has a rotator cuff tear, and it was really helping her. I can't find it. And I was like, oh man, I need to like double down on just like really making this a mission to help people. And so I went out to the track, and actually before it was at Rehab Scientist, which I couldn't get back because I just closed it. So I went to at Rehab Science, which was way better because it's the umbrella term for all of us who are movement practitioners.
Yeah.
So it's what you'd study. If you got a PhD, you'd get it in rehabilitation science. So I started it, and I just thought every day I'm just going to try to put something out that answers one of these common questions, provides exercises for things. It was never meant to be, it was just a hobby.
Yeah.
And I think right place, right time, like a lot of things in life, I was probably one of the first 5 physical therapists on Instagram posting PT content. So it wasn't until years later that people kept saying, like, you have a big audience, you should try and do something with this, that the unfortunate thing as a healthcare provider is that no one teaches you anything about entrepreneurship or business.
Yeah.
I had no experience. I had like no background that. My parents worked in healthcare. I had never been exposed to it. So it's been really a slow evolution, for me to just kind of figure that out. And luckily now I have some friends that are entrepreneurs who have done well, and I can kind of pick their brains at times. But yeah, it's really been just, it was kind of a hobby in the beginning that I can't take any credit for saying I had this strategy for knowing. There wasn't even anybody talking about it really. I mean, I feel like in the 2016, 2017, the whole influencer creator idea, now it's everywhere.
Yeah.
But nobody was really talking about that back then. At least I didn't hear it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, like if you go back 10 years or whatever, and you're like, there's going to be thousands of people, maybe even hundreds of thousands that make a full-time living just posting pictures on the internet themselves. It's like, that's a weird, like, you couldn't convince me of that back then. And like, it's such a thing now.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I think is fascinating? I love that you brought this up, and I've thought about it a lot, is this idea of ego, of like, this is narcissistic. I'm posting pictures of myself online. I'm like, who am I to think I can post a workout video or a real estate advice video? But it's narcissistic. I'm like, I like people looking at me and doing it. But if I didn't do it, then I'm not helping people. And so there's this interesting dynamic that we as influencers, like I am very egotistical. I like people liking my picture. Alex is shaking his head. Yes. I like people clicking like on my pictures. It feeds my ego. It makes me feel good. I get the dopamine hit, all that good stuff. But it also helps people. And so there's like this weird, I don't know. I'm not sure how I, it's a continually evolving thing, but how have you managed your niche celebrityness? Maybe we'll call it that.
I think it's so cool that you're saying that, because this is something I reflect on all the time. And there's actually a really cool social scientist named Arthur Brooks at Harvard.
I've heard of Arthur.
He's got a couple. His new book is out, and he talks about kind of these idols that people can have, kind of like the 4 idols. And I think for me, definitely the one that I'm most at risk of falling into is affirmation. And it's probably kind of what makes me good at doing this, because I like that engagement, and I think you do have to keep that in check. And I think when I was new to posting on social media, it definitely fed my ego more. And now that it's gone along longer, I think you kind of mature in it, and it's easier maybe to keep it in check. For sure, there's still that element of like, if there was no likes or views, it would be less motivating to keep doing it. And I think you do run the risk sometimes of thinking you're more special than you are. Yeah. It's like, you have to remind yourself, like, it's about the content and the original mission, and not letting it become too much about you. But it is a tricky thing. You can see why people who become like real celebrities and famous, how that can mess with, what you think about yourself, and just, you can kind of, let your ego kind of blow up. So
there's a reason so many like celebrity pastors fall into affairs, and celebrities in general fall into drugs and alcohol. You're told so many times how amazing you are, especially in the like what you do, what I do. Like the phrase "you changed my life," like that that's such a dangerous phrase. And I hear it too much, and it starts changing your mentality if you're not careful.
Oh,
you're like, I changed lives.
Yeah.
Like, hey, honey, I'm not doing the dishes tonight because I changed a life today. It's just doctors maybe get the same thing. I don't know, like at a hospital, they save lives.
For sure. No, I think you see that in like surgeons and things. They get that kind of narcissistic big ego. I mean, you hear that. We would see that all the time in PT, and I think that's another, like, where like a spouse or someone around you that can kind of keep you in check is so good, because you can start to think like, oh, do you know how many people said how cool I am today?
Exactly.
And, you're not impressed by what I'm doing?
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, who is it? There's an ancient like Roman emperor, I think, I don't know, Marcus Aurelius or one of them, hired a guy to go walk behind him and just say, "You're just a man," like all the time. Yeah. That's Alex. That's why
I'm the equalizer.
Yeah. Yeah, but there is a it's like ego in general, just with social media in general, is just such a dangerous thing. Yet it also drives human civilization in such a powerful way. And like, we have the things we have because of ego. And so, just trying to guard against that is something, it's a balancing act all the time.
Yeah, no, there's this quote from C.S. Lewis that I heard a psychologist say it one time at a talk, and I thought it's something I try to remind myself of, just because I think it's a little bit different, but it's about humility, and it's just this idea, because I think the danger for me is that I've always been a little insecure, and I think the affirmation, that's why that's the thing that it's kind of my idol, because it proves to me what I naturally think inside. And so this quote was, that humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less.
Yep.
Like, I love
that quote too.
And it's like, I think every time I remind myself of that, it brings me back to the original mission, that I'm not thinking about myself as much in doing this. It's about the content and putting out things that actually help people. And because even with business, even if you start, for me, as I start to think about how can I make money with these things, sometimes I think about that too much. I start to lose focus. I think the content, the quality of it will go down, because I'm not thinking about that person who's coming into the clinic and what's going to help them. But man, it's really cool that you brought that up. It's actually refreshing to hear you even think about talking about that, because it's always on my radar. And I'm like, how do I keep this in check? And I think, because I do wonder, right now, these things are all at a manageable size where it's sort of like a lifestyle business where I'm not out there doing too much. But when I was a kid, I always wanted to be famous. And I think I always had that, I wanted that. And now I think as I've gotten older, you see people who actually are famous, especially with social media. You see, like, I'm a big UFC fan. I watch Conor McGregor. Like, Conor McGregor can't go anywhere now. And you realize getting to that level would not be, it's not what you imagine when you're a kid. Yeah,
I once heard somebody say, I think it might have been Tim Ferriss back in the day, but that there's this sweet spot of fame where you're famous enough you could put yourself into situations where you're getting your ego fed and you're a big deal. You go to a conference on physical therapy and everyone's like, oh my gosh, but then you go to the grocery store and no one knows who you are. And there's a sweet spot in there where you get your ego fed. And I want to I want to stay there. I don't want a TV show, because if I get a TV show, now it's a problem. But it does feel good. It feels good when people recognize you once in a while.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you can go into a situation. Yeah,
I was
great.
like in London on a lot. Some guy came up. He's like, "Are you the rehab science guy?"
Yeah.
That's awesome. Like, I was so pumped for the whole day. I feel like I'd be lying if I didn't say that. But yeah, if it was happening all the time and you couldn't, because it is nice to kind of be anonymous and just have that once in a while. Like, I was even hearing Mr. Beast talk about this. Yeah. Like, he was at a level for a long time where he kind of is what you're talking about. It was like that sweet spot of fame, and now it's like,
yeah, he can't go anywhere.
No. He's like, he said something about if he goes to a Walmart, from the time the first picture is taken, he sets a timer of 5 minutes, and they have to leave no longer than that 5 minutes, because other people will just start putting on their
calling
story.
all their
people
friends.
Come there. Yeah.
It'd be a terrible life. I think about Taylor Swift like that sometimes. Like, probably one of the most famous people in the world.
The NFL is getting more popular because Taylor Swift is dating.
I know.
That's how famous she is.
Yeah, it's absurd. It sounds like a
have
terrible
a
life.
Existence. It's not a normal,
But I do love how you said, like, if you just focus on the content, like, I want to help people. In fact, I had a social media mastermind last year where I coached a couple, a dozen people or so through social media in the real estate space. And the thing I stressed more than anything else that entire year was, like, every piece of content has to be about helping somebody else. And so I think it's a fun practice that I encourage people with is, take a picture of your lunch, but make it about the viewer. Like, how do you turn your picture of your lunch into something about the viewer? And every single thing you put out, generally speaking, should be trying to help people. And if you start focusing too much on the business of like, what do I need? You know, Gary Vaynerchuk calls it a jab, 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 right hook. If you're just like, if all you're doing is right hooking and trying to ask and ask and ask and ask, people just don't like it. Yeah. And so, I think when I look at your account, like your account's just constantly giving information. So has that been a purposeful thing? Like, what does your social media strategy look like? How have you developed that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's so true. I feel like just what you're talking about, anytime I'm too focused on myself, and maybe it's just this kind of transition to kind of being an entrepreneur, I'm solo a lot, in my own head. And I think times when I get anxious and stressed, I realize I'm thinking about myself, and as soon as you start thinking outwardly, and you hear this all the time, like as soon as you do something service oriented, you feel way better.
Yep.
And I mean, in terms of kind of my account and that strategy, I think I was kind of lucky in that early on when I deleted the account those couple of times, I realized this is a self-serving, like this post is just me talking about how cool I am. Like I can jump on, whatever, I can do this thing. And I think now for me, the strategy has just been, I don't actively have to think about, I need to think about someone else and helping them, because I think because it's physical therapy, it's just naturally a service industry. So it's like I'm just always thinking about what are the common problems and questions, and like somebody will come into the clinic and I'm like, oh, I need to do a neck mobility post. I haven't done that in a while, and this person had that problem. So I think it makes it a little bit easier. It's exactly what you're talking about. It's like you're thinking about how can this thing help someone else. But for me, I think just because of the industry I'm in, it's easier to have it be for other people or sort of geared towards other people.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's perfect. The book, where'd that come from? Why'd you write it? Tell me about it.
Yeah, so the book, it's Rehab Science, just like my accounts. It really, the motivation behind it, the problem with social media is that even though it can be extremely positive and helpful, you just can't be as comprehensive and nuanced as you'd want to be. And I think it would bother me if someone came to my account, because I know that this happens. Sometimes people think, oh, I have tennis elbow, and these 3 exercises he put in this post is all physical therapy is, and they don't understand really how nuanced like the evaluation and tailoring things and how much goes into what we know about pain and injury. And a book is just such a good place, for putting that all down. And I think a lot of people, this book has a bunch of programs, which I wanted it to be applicable. I think a lot of people will just jump to those programs, but I hope they'll go back. The first 10 chapters are on the science of pain and injury. And as a PT, having that information, I think kind of helps protect me a little bit. Like I don't get quite as anxious about injuries and pain issues. Whereas a lot of times I'll see patients come in and, people get pretty stressed when they have a pain that they can't see. It's inside somewhere and they don't know what's causing it. And so I think when you kind of start to just arm yourself a little bit with some knowledge about pain and injury, it can kind of help protect you a little bit from some of those worries about it. So really it was just, can I put out something that's like this comprehensive, all-encompassing work that someone could have on their coffee table, that they could learn about pain and injury, but they could also just open to like a plantar fasciitis program or a tennis elbow program, and there's exercises I can literally just start doing this. It's like going to PT. It's like if you went to PT for these 50 conditions and they gave you a program and just had them at home.
Yeah, I love that. It's the largest book I've ever seen also. So that's
these guys, and I have to, my co-author, Glenn Cordoza, that dude is awesome. He actually reached out to me. Glenn has worked on a bunch of really kind of iconic books over the years. There's one called How to Become a Supple Leopard.
Oh yeah, I have that.
Book. Yeah, so Glenn did that book.
Haven't read
Kelly.
It.
Yeah, like
Glenn, it's also a huge book.
It's a huge book.
Shelf,
yeah, they specialize. This Victory Belt, my publishing house, they kind of specialize in these textbook-sized books that are meant for like just the regular person as kind of a resource. So, but dude, Glenn, he's been doing this for 20 years. He's our age. He just knows, because a big book like this, if it was just text, it'd be really boring. He's so good at like, let's do a call-out box here, an illustration here, just that skill. It wouldn't have happened if he wasn't such a good writer and knew all that stuff. So.
That's cool, man. Well, let's shift over to the next segment of the show. This is called the 3-2-1 pivot. Okay. I'm going to ask you 3 books that pivoted your life, changed the direction of your life, 2 people that changed the direction of your life, and 1 pivot quote.
Okay.
So let's start with the books. 3 books.
Yeah, so 3 books. I think I would say one that's been around for a long time and just recently, it seems like I pick it up every year or two is Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of
yeah,
Not Giving an F.
that's so good.
I tend to be someone who starts giving an F about
Yeah.
things I can't control and too many little things. So
Yeah.
that
I'd love to
book-
have that guy on the podcast.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna dump on the chiropractors, but you were so nice.
That book just kind of helps me recalibrate sometimes,
Yeah.
just on I don't know, just shapes my perspective on not caring so much about things I can't control. There's a little book, I'm gonna forget who the author's name is, but there's a little book that has made a difference in my life and my family. We use it together as sort of like a devotional, but it's called Attitudes of Gratitude. And it's just this little book that has kind of daily devotional gratitude. And so actually my 12-year-old was watching a YouTube video of another family and got this idea. This book's been sitting around, but she was like, can we do a family devotional?
That's cool.
She saw this YouTube family doing it. So people talk about bad social media as there's a positive. So my 12-year-old kind of spearheaded this thing where, especially on Saturdays and Sundays, we sit together in the living room and do one of these gratitude devotionals and
That's
kind of
cool.
all reflect on what we're grateful for. So gratitude, as we all know, is huge. And that book is just a nice bite-sized daily kind of reminder. The other one is Arthur Brooks, that social scientist I was talking
Yeah.
about. He has a new book that the title is, oh gosh, I think it's How to Build a Successful Life is the title. I'm currently reading it right now, but he has two books. But that he studies happiness,
Yeah.
and I think the way he breaks it down into these macronutrients you need for happiness, you need this satisfaction, enjoyment, and then meaning/purpose. And if people don't have those three, then usually they'll feel some kind of level of unhappiness. And so I just really like the way he breaks down those kind of macronutrients.
That's cool.
Just working towards those. And I'd heard him on Rich Roll's podcast, and it was probably the most influential interview I'd heard in the last like 5 years or something. So just for me personally, where I've been at and just stressors, and that was just really helpful to kind of get me back on track.
Yeah, very cool. Well, yeah, another guy to add to the podcast list.
Mhm.
Yeah, he'd be great. All right, two pivot people. Who's made a big impact in your life?
Yeah, I would say for sure my mom is just, I was saying before, she is a psychiatric nurse practitioner. She's one of the most empathetic, thoughtful, just good listening people. Everywhere we go, she's instantly best friends with everyone. We're like in Jersey Mike's, and everyone wants to tell her like their life story. What the hell is going on right now?
I love
But
people like that.
my mom is amazing. She just has this energy that people just open up to her. And so, she was just hugely influential in terms of, on a lot of levels, but I think just the way she interacts and treats other people was a big part of that. I grew up with my stepdad, and I'd actually probably say, even though I didn't get along with him super well all growing up, he probably really was the other most influential person. He passed away of brain cancer during COVID. And so, it was hard to lose him. I think looking back on it now, as much as I fought with him as a kid, and just, he was so strict and authoritative, and so many stories of just giving him the bird and just fights. And he was so on top of like discipline, treating other people with respect, leaving things better than the way you found them, just kind of rules of life, almost like Jordan Peterson talks about, that I thought were annoying at the time, but they really have shaped who I am, and I think helped me become a successful adult to whatever degree. So things I think about now as a parent, and those are probably, I think probably, there's lots of people you can name, but they have to be probably the two most influential.
Cool. What about one pivot quote? A quote that's changed the direction of your life.
I think I'd probably go back to that C.S. Lewis quote.
Yeah.
That's the one I go back to all the time, because I do, as a naturally a person who kind of questions what I know and my knowledge, it's something I've always kind of been insecure about, like how smart am I?
Yep.
So affirmations are a delicate dance for me to, I think I have to figure out how to feed that internally and, keep my humility kind of in check. And I think for me, it's that quote reminds me of, again, that humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And I do recognize that I have a tendency to think less of myself. And when I am feeling anxious or stressed, it's usually I'm thinking about myself too much. And so that I have to constantly remind myself of that quote.
Very cool. All right, next segment, past, present, future. Start with, what is your advice to your younger self?
Yeah, younger self. I would probably say, I think reflecting back on, obviously everybody has challenges. There's things that come up when you're younger, but I feel like there were a lot of way more positives than negative when I was younger. I think it would honestly be kind of business related, and I would have told myself to learn more about entrepreneurship and like try and start some businesses when you're younger. Same. And like, I waited until longer just because I didn't know what I didn't know, and so I didn't try to start a business until I was in my mid 30s, I guess, or early to mid 30s. And, there were a lot of things that failed about that and didn't go well, and that business shut down. And it, like everyone says, that helped me evolve, and I learned a lot from it. But I wish I had started that like in my early 20s.
Yeah, I hear you. Same. What is something you've done in the last 12 months you've implemented into your life, some kind of change or new habit, action, routine that's given you a better life?
I think the thing that's made the biggest difference in the last 12 months is I hadn't done blood work in a long time. And I had my blood work done and started incorporating some micronutrients and things that I was deficient in. And I talk to people about the role of nutrition and these things all the time when it comes to pain and injury. And I just hadn't done that. I literally hadn't had my blood done since I was 25.
Wow.
And so I ended up hooking up with this group, found out about them from a podcast, and went and had my, just kind of did a consultation. I noticed my energy was lower. I thought maybe my testosterone was low or something like that, and ended up finding some things to kind of go after. And I think I'm always talking to people about like objective data. Like people come to PT and we measure range of motion, and we tell them you can move through 160 degrees, or you've got this strength level, or you scored this score on this test or whatever. And data is just really helpful. I'm looking at it for sleep, like my heart rate, other kind of health related parameters, but I just hadn't done that blood work in so long. And to be honest, I think during COVID, probably like a lot of people, been in my head a lot, and there's so many variables that happen during these last few years, different stressors and things that you can kind of get lost in that and not know what is the direction you should go. And I think that actually just having data on what's going on inside my body gave me some things to instantly start implementing, and they've probably made the biggest difference in like terms of my energy and just how I feel and how I sleep and all these things. And then you just get that positive momentum, everything else gets better. So
that's great.
I don't mean to be too prying, but what micronutrients? I mean, you don't have to tell like, is this common things or? Yeah,
common. I started with magnesium first, and I feel like a lot of people take magnesium for like helping sleep, but that made a big difference. I was a little low in my vitamin D, and I think I actually maybe a year or two ago went to the dermatologist, and the dermatologist kind of freaked me out about sun exposure. So I think I tend to be a little bit of I swing on the pendulum. Yeah. So I went hardcore, like I think just I wasn't getting any sun. Like I was just covering up all the time.
Yeah.
So
they'll do it. Dermatologists will freak you out.
Freak you out.
If you touch the sun one time, you'll die of cancer.
She's like, you need sunscreen everywhere time you go outside.
Yep.
So I think I went a little crazy, but those have been the two biggest things I changed just initially, and there's some more I'm going to go after. But just magnesium and vitamin D were the first two. I'll probably do I was a little low in vitamin B12 and some thyroid. I might try there's this thyroid kind of supplement, so I might try that. But yeah, that's what I've started with.
Yeah, 15 minutes before you got here, actually, I had a phlebotomist, that they're called.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, sucking out a bunch of blood, doing a blood test just today.
Totally.
So I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So
nice.
All right, when you pass away someday, what do you want people to say about you?
He was so cool.
Easy.
No, I think what would be amazing, it actually is a little depressing to me to think about that most of us are forgotten in just a couple of generations. I honestly that will sometimes get me down, and then I'll start to feel like, why am I doing any of this? Have you been trying? But I think we all have, I think what I hope for is that I create this, I contribute to like incremental change in us getting better as humans. And so I think my hope would be that people would look back and say, oh, this Tom Walters guy, this physical therapist, he helped expand and educate more people on how we think about pain and injury and how we can help combat those things? How can we use exercise and movement to help get rid of pain? And I think we kind of take it for granted in the U.S. how developed we are in terms of healthcare.
Yeah.
Physical therapy, that's true. Like the UK, Australia, the U.S. tend to be more advanced in this field, and so it has been eye-opening to me to be on social media all these years and interact. I interact with a lot of people in India, and just in the Middle East and East Asia. There are just a lot of people who don't understand much about pain and injury and how exercise and movement can be used to keep their system healthy. And so I think if that was the ultimate end kind of outcome of this, that I helped move the needle on that, that's what I think would be pretty cool.
Perfect. All right, 2 more questions in the wrap up here. First, what are you excited about? What's coming up in your life?
Oh man, what am I excited about? Well, I'd say kind of I'm really actually excited about this whole journey right now of the book coming out and doing podcasts has been really exciting. Next year I'll have courses, and I think I'm just excited to actually make rehab science a business. Like, because you do hit a point where if something you're doing never makes money, it's hard to sustain it and keep it going. And so I think that was the thing I needed to realize. I feel bad sometimes about making money in the thing I'm doing, you know? So I think I had to kind of teach myself or just hear it from enough people that if you make money doing it, it will sustain it and you'll help more people. So I think I'm excited about, I'll have courses come out next year. Glenn and I are going to work on them for practitioners to help more practitioners around the world just get better at exercise prescription for people with pain. And so that's pretty exciting. And then, I mean, just there's always exciting things happening with family and kids. And what we were, I think I was telling you, we were living in Bali at the start of COVID. Yeah. And we had to leave early. We were supposed to be there for 6 months. So we're going to go back to Bali for a month next summer. That's cool. So that's on our radar. So that's pretty exciting.
That's cool. Yeah. It's funny about making money. I used to be the same way. Like, I don't like charging money for anything. And like, I was part of the Bigger Pockets world, which is like a huge real estate site. And like, that was founded on the idea you don't pay for education. You shouldn't. It's bad. Like, get everything free. And then I started doing these like master classes or masterminds out here in Maui and inviting people out. We were charging like $5,000, $7,000, even we got up to. And all of a sudden I realized all those people were taking such massive action afterwards versus the million people that I taught for free who 90% of them don't do anything. And I'm like, oh, maybe there's something to it. And I thought the groups I'm a part of where I've paid to be part of like certain masterminds or groups, like I show up and I do the work. And then the ones that they give me free memberships, I don't show up and I don't do the work. So yeah, my perspective's changed quite a bit.
That's so true. That's actually really cool to hear. And it's neat to hear it from a business perspective because you see this all the time, actually just in like healthcare with PT. We always talk about adherence. You give a patient something and very few don't really want to do it. And that's actually way less common in cash-based practices.
I bet, yeah.
So when people come in and they pay cash for it, they really want to do that. They're motivated.
100%. That makes so much sense.
That's pretty cool. Like actually from a business standpoint, it actually makes me feel better about maybe doing conferences and actually charging people. Because if you actually see that they make change after that and they're motivated, that's pretty cool.
I have a group called the 50. I don't really talk about it much, but it's a growing, like it's a group I'm building. It's only 50 people, all multi-million-dollar real estate investors, but it's $50,000 to be in it. And the guys first of all, I had 15 calls and like 13 have signed up, which blew my mind. And the fact that they show up and play full out every time. And these guys, it's ridiculous because they've so heavily invested, they have to make a return. Like, in it, they already are successful. So like, I'm not taking money from grandma. It's like, but that's so fun to be a part of because these guys are in it, like fully deep in it because they paid. So don't feel bad paying.
Be like, you're gonna go get after
they're
it.
Going to go get after it. And
cool.
The kind of person that can pay that money also to be in a group with other people that can pay that kind of money separates those people as just a different level. So I wouldn't feel bad at all. Have you read Alex Hormozy's $100 million offers?
I just was listening to him kind of going through his slides on it, but I feel like I need to.
Yeah, $100 million offers was the best internet marketing book I ever read. So, and he's got the new one, $100 million leads, which I'm just about to start. So.
Yeah. Oh, maybe it was leads. I was just watching a presentation on leads.
Yeah, leads is the new one, but offers, I think
you really benefited from that.
Really,
okay, I'll add that to my list.
It's so good. All right, last question: where can people find out more about you and follow you?
Mostly Instagram and YouTube. So it's at Rehab Science on there. And the book is Rehab Science: How to Overcome Pain and Heal from Injury. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all those places. People can always DM me. I try to respond to most DMs on Instagram. So if people are looking for a link, I've got this problem. Is there something you've got or whatever? They can reach out. So, but yeah, those are the big spots: Instagram, Facebook,
Love it.
The book stuff.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thanks,
you,
brother. Thanks, man.